Developed by Crest Helm Studios and published by Fulqrum, Diluvian Ultra is a pulpy sci-fi first-person shooter with a vibrant retro aesthetic and lots of creepy crawlies. Diluvian has been floating around the retro shooter sphere for a while now. In fact, I played the first demo a few years back and then another one roughly a year later. I'll be honest, the demos didn't quite grab me. I was intrigued by the visuals and concept, but the gameplay didn't really click. And so when the release build finally came my way, I wasn't quite sure what to expect. And now that I've had a chance to put it through its paces, all I can say is, damn, these devs did some work on this. Is Diluvian Ultra an infestation worth having, or should we be grabbing the insecticide? Let's find out. But before we bug out, I want to say a big thank you to Fulqrum Publishing for providing the review code. Alrighty, let's get buzzing. This first build of Diluvian Ultra features 10 levels with a hub zone in between. There are 6 weapons available with 30 upgrades spread between them, as well as 13 different enemy types. It is currently priced at $9.99 American and European. Now, something to point out is that this is not early access. This is a standalone release with the plan to put out subsequent chapters as DLC. Basically, it's being put out episodically, which is somewhat similar to early access, and I wouldn't blame some of you for wanting to hold off until all the DLCs are released. But this is being considered a final product. Diluvian Ultra takes place in a dark and sinister sci-fi universe, where mankind has spread out throughout the galaxy, more machine now than human, and ancient unknowable evils reside in the cosmos. It's a universe that will remind many of franchises like Warhammer 40k, and the parallels are certainly clear. However, Diluvian's grim universe is a bit more colorful and fantastical, as if it were ripped from a cult graphic novel or the pages of Heavy Metal magazine. And for this genre, it feels very original. You play as Atilla, Prince of the Diluvians, an insect-like race traversing the cosmos aboard a bulbous, organic vessel known as a tomb ship. Atilla is in the middle of a centuries-long journey across the stars when he is suddenly awoken from hibernation, finding his ship has been invaded by humans known as Myrmidons, who are laying waste to his subjects. Shocked, devastated, and outright pissed, Atilla collects his sword and squire, a deadly little bug named Bella, and goes on a bloody rampage to expel these vile invaders. I really dig this story so far. Diluvian's twisted sci-fi universe is absolutely fascinating, and the devs do a brilliant job conveying it without relying on pages of text in some bloated codex. Although, nothing wrong with putting that in the game if they want. Prince Atilla is a bizarre and compelling character with a hideous appearance, looking like a half-burnt corpse with gold horns representing his crown. While he is a bloodthirsty monster, he doesn't present himself as such, speaking with the grace and elegance you expect from royalty. And the side characters, who I don't really want to spoil, are equally compelling. Beyond appearance. And while I wouldn't say Diluvian is a humorous game, its brief moments of levity and sheer over-the-top pulpy sci-fi spectacle is a welcome dash of spice. What I really enjoyed about the narrative though is that it's all steeped in gray zones, keeping me guessing at every turn as to who the true heroes and villains were, if any. The game leans sympathetic towards the prince. For him, this invasion is an act of terrorism, and throughout he mourns the loss of his subjects and friends. However, it's not hard to see that he is the overlord of a vicious alien race that is capable of conquering worlds and enslaving millions, and perhaps these invading humans are trying to save the galaxy from his menace. However, getting deeper into it, I started to realize the humans' motives may not be so pure either. For a retro-style shooter, the story was a breath of fresh air that had me hooked and excited to see what was next. Like the story, Diluvian's audio and visual presentation is equally bizarre and engrossing. Built in the Unreal Engine, I would describe its retro aesthetics as feeling illustrated. Many of the sprites have a painted look to them that are full of beautiful and grotesque animations, largely seen within your arsenal of organic weaponry. Ew, look at those eyeballs! In fact, much of the tomb ship features this painted aesthetic, with the invading humans rocking a more traditional retro sprite look, something that naturally makes them contrast from the environment and feel like they don't belong, which makes sense because they're invaders. I'm not sure if that was the intention, but if it was, it's a smart choice. The game's color palette also supports this. The tomb ship and those who reside in it are characterized by deep reds, purples, pinks, light blues, and earthy browns. A whole slathering of rich color that makes it feel like you're walking within a living organism. Which you are. Whereas the humans are gray, white, yellow, and green, making them feel more artificial and, ironically, inhuman. The color palette also supports a central theme of the game, the tug of war between nature and technology. Each level is distinct in its visuals and lathered with wonderful creepy detail, like giant eyeballs blinking at you and tiny bugs flying around. It's a bit of a cliche to say, but the tomb ship is truly its own character. The music was solid, a dynamic soundtrack of synthwave beats that complements the bizarre sci-fi setting, with some nice creepy ambiance for non-combat sections. And sound design was rich and detailed, my favorite bits of it being the humans freaking out when you attack them. The downside is that this initial build was quite buggy, no pun intended. To the dev team's credit, throughout my time with it, they were churning out updates to address any reported issues. But unfortunately, it was the sort of thing where they would patch one leak only for another to spring up. Or at least that's how it felt. There was one bug that made stationary turrets impossible to kill, making one level borderline unplayable. And when it was fixed, suddenly the music began to echo, and the controls menu was glitched. And when that got addressed, suddenly the quick slash on my blood sword stopped working halfway through a level. The most frustrating I encountered is when I wasn't able to finish a late game level because a boss fight glitched. This happened twice in a row, and then a few levels later it happened again with another boss, which would have been comical if it wasn't so irritating. Once again, the devs have been churning out updates to address these issues, and while I did get frustrated with this stuff, it wasn't enough to overshadow what was overall a fun and positive gaming experience. But for anyone jumping into this within the launch window, there's a good chance you're gonna run into some roughness. This may not be early access, but it certainly felt like it.
Where did he go?
While Diluvian takes inspiration from old-school shooters of the 90s, its gameplay is actually somewhat non-traditional for a first-person shooter. In fact, I'd say it's outright quirky in some regards, and I mean that in a good way. All enemies have yellow shields that must be broken in order to land a kill shot, and Diluvian's wiggling arsenal revolve around this mechanic, with each able to inflict red lethal damage or yellow shield damage, sometimes both. For instance, Bella, your squire, has lethal damage that will kill an unshielded enemy in 1 or 2 hits, but she's lousy against shields. That's where the Ion Impaler comes in, essentially a semi-automatic rifle. The Impaler is able to cut through shields more easily. However, it only does shield damage, so when you break a shield with it, you have to swap to a lethal weapon, like Bella, to finish them off. And that's pretty much the gist of combat. Break a shield as fast and efficiently as you can, and then finish them off with lethal damage. And the other pieces of your arsenal play with this dynamic in unique ways. The chain gun deals rapid-fire shield damage, but when its bullets are fired at the ground, they become proxy mines that deal lethal damage. And the shotgun shoots out big old death balls that up close do lethal damage, but at a distance does only shield damage. So you could break several enemies' shields from a distance and go in for the kill. Even more interesting, there's only 2 ammo pools these weapons can draw from. Your organic weapons draw from green bio ammo, and your energy weapons use blue energy ammo. Bella, however, has infinite ammo but can overheat and lock up, in which you have to pet her to calm her down. Aw, I like Bella. This is what makes her a go-to kill shot. It's an ammo system that had me focusing on the right weapon for the right situation. Diluvian's ammo pickups are on the tight side, at least in the early levels, so you have to be a little more intentional with the combat. Swapping through the arsenal willy-nilly is likely to waste your ammo.
I'm down!
It works, and the simple mechanic of shield breaking and swapping weapons for a kill shot brings a lot of satisfaction. Is it the tightest FPS combat I've ever experienced? No, but it is fun, and I appreciate that it got me thinking a little differently compared to other shooters. And I have yet to mention your other combat mechanics rounding everything out, like big bouncy grenades that can demolish groups of enemies, and a ground pound that is needed for traversal but is great for taking out pests. Plus, there's the Blood Sword, your melee weapon, featuring a meaty charge attack, but it also has its quick slash mapped to your F key, which I loved, meaning you can melee at any time, and later on you can purchase an upgrade that allows you to deflect enemy projectiles with it. Speaking of upgrades, throughout the adventure you collect focus points that can be used to upgrade your weapons, increasing stats like firepower and critical damage, along with each weapon's alternate fire, some of which have functions other than combat, like healing you or giving you a hint as to where to go next. There's also some upgrades that lend lethal damage to some of your shield weapons. Enemy AI is pretty simplistic. Baddies will stand around and shoot, pursue, and perhaps knife you if you're too close. But simplicity was far from an issue, because the challenge of this game leans more towards bullet hell, where it's all about dodging a barrage of projectiles and aggressive lasers, as well as dealing with tricky enemy placements. And by the way, the level design is also very strong. There's an impressive variety of combat scenarios and differing arenas, whether they be traditional big rooms, tight mazes, or high-up platforms. Exploring also brings stimulating navigational puzzles and intelligent looping shortcuts to keep the backtracking minimal, not to mention the expertly hidden secrets often requiring clever platforming. It does have a tendency to bottleneck you in tight areas where enemies can trounce you, which can be annoying and a little cheap, and huge enemy counts in the late game can be overwhelming. But overall, rampaging through the tomb ship was the furthest thing from boring. Getting back to the enemies, they do have some fun counters to trip you up. One enemy type is able to heal others, making them target number 1, another can spawn round purple pests, and one type can throw up an emergency shield when you break their main one, forcing you to get up close to them. It's good spice for the combat, and I hope the devs keep pushing this sort of thing in the future chapters. If it's one area of gameplay I have some thoughts about, it's the respawn system. Death and respawning resembles Dark Souls' bonfire mechanic. When you die, you respawn at checkpoints called waystones, where you also upgrade your weapons. This happens at the expense of one of your focus points, which drops at your death point just like Souls, and if you make your way back to where you died, you can retrieve it, unless you haven't found a waystone yet, in which you have to restart the level. I don't mind a respawn system like this, but I feel like it should be way stricter. Because let's say you die again before retrieving that focus point. Unlike in Dark Souls, you won't lose it. It will still be there. So you could have like 6 focus points, die 6 times in a row, and still be able to retrieve all 6 of them. And by the way, enemies don't respawn. So if you die in a tricky area, it's just a matter of coming back over and over until all the enemies are gone. And no, dying with 0 focus points does not mean game over. So there's not really any consequence to dying. Now, this is an aspect of the story. The tomb ship is able to revive the prince no matter what. But my thought is, if you could lose them permanently, and if you got a true game over when all your focus points are lost, essentially treating them like lives, then it could create an interesting risk-reward thing where the player has to choose, do I upgrade my weapons to get stronger, or do I keep my focus points so I can survive? Now I know I sound like armchair game designer over here, and for all I know, something like this could totally break the game. And to be fair, there is a scoring system that docks you points for deaths, which is a decent incentive not to. But at the moment, it's not clear if there are rewards for doing a perfect run, other than a high score. I don't know, I feel like the devs should rework this, because what's the point of losing your focus points if there's not a chance of losing them for good? Diluvian Ultra is a gem. It has one of the strongest stories I've encountered in a shooter in some time, a fun spin on FPS combat, its visuals are mesmerizing, and it has Bella, who is adorable. The only things that trip it up are its technical issues and a respawn system devoid of consequence. But despite those things, it gets my recommendation, and I am eager to dive into Chapter 2, whenever that comes around. Hopefully soon, but not too soon. Let's make sure it's good and polished before it's released. And that's it for me. What are your thoughts on Diluvian Ultra? Be sure to let me know down in the comments. If you enjoyed the video, please be sure to like, subscribe, share, and smack that bell. If you want to come say hi, my Discord is linked below, along with my affiliate links. I'm Kirk, and thank you for watching this video. Stay safe out there.